And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this speech by Gil Hoffman. We are very fortunate indeed to have someone who's so knowledgeable of events and in the Middle East. Gil is the chief political correspondent and analyst for the Jerusalem Post, which I think many of you know is an English language paper based in Jerusalem. That's still true, isn't it?
www.jpost.com.
He is well connected to Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Hoffman has interviewed every major figure across the Israeli political spectrum. He's been interviewed by top media on 6 continents and is a regular analyst on CNN, Al Jazeera, and other news outlets. In fact, I recommend that you go on to his website and watch about a 10-minute interview with Al Jazeera. It's fascinating. You'll learn a lot about both Gil and what's going on in the Middle East. He has been called the most optimistic man in Israel. When I asked him about that on the drive over here from Boise, he responded, at the very least, it's a good marketing slogan. That was by Israeli television. His writing and TV appearances provide a behind-the-scenes look at both the intrigue and humor in the Israeli political arena. He's from Chicago and is a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Journalism, which, for those of you who are in journalism, is among the very best in our country. He's written for the Miami Herald and the Arizona Republic before he moved to Israel in 1999. He was, of course, in the IDF, and he's still in the reserve. He has lectured in 7 countries, and I just found out 43 states. He lives in Jerusalem, has 2 children, a boy and a girl, and I know that his wife is alive and well. I just got off the phone with her. So without further ado, Gil Hoffman.
Thank you to Professor and to all the people involved in organizing this talk. And thank you to all of you for coming, especially the people who weren't required to come here. It's wonderful that you gave up your time here in the afternoon to hear a little bit about what's going on in my country, in Israel. And for me, it's a great pleasure for me to be here in Idaho. I wanted to come here for a long time. There's room in the front if the speaker doesn't bite. It's okay. You can come in. And people that are there in the corner, when you see other people walk in, tell them to come in too. I know some people have class till later, and that's fine. Not too long ago, I was in school myself, and I know how it is. I grew up here in America, but with parents who were from Israel. So I kind of grew up watching the news a lot in my crib. You know, maybe if I would have grown up watching cartoons like the other kids, I'd be a healthier person today. But I might not have been as ready as I was for my job when I got it. As you heard from the introduction, I have 2 full-time jobs. One is following around Benjamin Netanyahu and the other Israeli politicians, and the other is following around my 2 children, aged 4 and 6. And sometimes it kind of feels like it's the same job. I know we've got a lot of journalism majors in the room. Raise your hand if you're a journalism major. Minor? Okay. All right. So you'll hope whatever you major in makes money. No, journalism is a wonderful profession in which you get to have a very exciting life while your friends from school that majored in law and science and engineering and whatever make fun of you. The beer will always be on them. But you're going to have a much more fun life. So I do recommend it. Where I come from in Israel, print journalism is actually thriving. I mean, my newspaper in particular, because it's in English, and we have a Hebrew-speaking country, 99% of our readers are online. We have a huge impact online. We're one of the top most read news sites around the world at www.jpost.com, which I'll say a few times here today, because people care so much about what's going on in the Middle East, and it's seen as a source of news that people can trust. I remember one time I got taken aside by the man who was president of Israel at the time, who was an 80-something-year-old man at the time named Ezra Weitzman. He's no longer with us. Pulled me aside from the other journalists by the ear and said, make sure you write down that I said this and this about Mubarak, because Mubarak reads your newspaper and he doesn't read the other newspapers that are in Hebrew. And so that's when I understood the important role that we have. We write the first draft on history every single day in a country where history is being made every single day. And that's a very big responsibility that I take very seriously. In Israel, we have 17 print newspapers every single day, because in a place where the history moves so fast, people feel like you have to have in the morning something that puts it into perspective, something that stops the world for a little bit and makes you be able to look back and look forward from a stopping point and not have everything keep on going nonstop. Also, we have another thing that helps keep print journalism alive in Israel, which is the Sabbath. We're a Jewish country where Friday night through Saturday night is a day of rest that people take seriously, even though they observe in many different ways. Only 19% of Israelis consider themselves Orthodox, meaning that they follow the Sabbath according to the way it says in the Torah, which means that they won't turn on their TV or their computer on the Sabbath during those 25 hours. The phone doesn't ring during those 25 hours. It's a really nice, relaxing break from the rest of the week. I think that if God didn't invent it, somebody would have had to. But even the people that aren't Orthodox, they don't consider it restful to open up their tablet or their laptop on the Sabbath. But going to the beach with a print newspaper, that still feels like rest. And so I think there'll always be a need for print newspapers where I live in Jerusalem. But it's, I had a little bit of experience in journalism in America before moving to Israel, and it's different. In America, the journalists tend to work 9 to 5 whenever possible. I don't think I've ever done that. Here, in Israel, the news happens all the time, so it keeps me on my toes. I work really from 5 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the morning. Whenever anything happens, to stop whatever I'm doing and update the website or tweet. Got to tweet all the time now. Gil_Hoffman on Twitter. And it just doesn't stop. In Israel, unlike in America, people still watch the news on TV. Unlike America, where more people get their news from Jon Stewart and Colbert, Northwestern alone, than other news sources. In Israel, people do watch the news, which is on at 8 o'clock at night. It's the third highest rated show on TV after the Israeli version of American Idol and the Israeli version of Survivor. Because the news is so exciting, you can't script the stuff. So we as print reporters, lots of times we have to do our work, our more serious work for page 1 only after the 8 o'clock news. Sometimes we only start after 8 o'clock. And we're calling our politicians at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and it's no big deal. I know the minister's children, their names by voice, because I'm so used to calling them at 10 o'clock at night. You can reach the politicians really at any time. And they understand that it's in their interest to be talking to us, even if we call them at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that makes it very different. People take the news very seriously because they realize that it is part of history. So it's a lot of fun covering the politicians' day out. I had a little taste of covering American politics in November. I covered Obama's victory party in Chicago. I saw a lot of people who are really happy, a lot of people who know how to dance. A lot of people are really happy in the press box too, it seemed, at the victory party. And I was talking to my colleagues who cover politics in America. And I said, on the one hand, you guys have it easier than I do, because you're covering only 2 political parties. Where I'm from in Chicago, there's even only 1 political party. And I've got it a little bit harder. In Israel, we have 34 political parties that ran in the election. The founders of our country thought it was very important that there be a party for everybody to vote for. After Jews had been minorities around the world for 2,000 years, the founders of the country, they wanted to make sure that nobody would be disenfranchised. And so 34 parties, including a few different parties of minorities. There are 3 Israeli Arab parties in our parliament today. Our outgoing parliament had more non-Jews than the history of the state. And so 34 parties makes it a little intense. No one party has ever won a 61-vote majority out of the 120 members of parliament. So they have to form coalitions of parties to run the country together, which is what our prime minister is in the middle of doing. But on the other hand, our election in Israel lasts only 3 months. Your election in America seems to last 3 years. So I think I might have it a little bit easier than my friends who are covering politics in America. And so our election that I finished covering in Israel, for me it was fascinating to see how the world got it so completely wrong. I gave a lot of interviews to the foreign press before our election on January 22nd. And the main question that I was asked time and time again is, why are Israelis moving to the right? You know, we define in Israel right and left wing. I know it means a lot of different things in America, but in Israel we define right and left wing purely on the Palestinian issue. Whereas we define the left wing as people most interested in being generous to the Palestinians in any kind of final status agreement. And the right wing is being less interested in being generous to the Palestinians in any kind of final status agreement. And so the foreign press was asking me, why are Israelis moving to the right? And I told them, I don't really agree with your thesis. And I think you're going to see in the election that it's not true. Maybe it might make sense that Israelis would move to the right. Since Israel withdrew from Gaza, now 7.5 years ago, we have seen 12,000 rockets fall upon Israeli civilians. That's the kind of thing that would make people really worried about their security. For the last 4 years, Netanyahu has gone around the world begging the Palestinians to come to the negotiating table, and they haven't come. That's the kind of thing that would make Israelis have doubts about the peace process. That's the kind of thing that would maybe make them move away from the left to the right. But it didn't happen. We saw on election day, here, there's room in the front, right over here. I'm only spinning a little bit. We saw on election day that the Israelis actually elected a more moderate parliament. In the election 4 years ago, in 2009, the 120 members of parliament were divided, 65 for parties on the center-right and 55 for parties on the center-left. And this election was much, much closer, 61 to 59. A razor-thin majority, almost a statistical tie. Now, how'd that happen? Because this election, for the first time, perhaps ever in Israel, the people didn't vote on the 2 issues that they normally vote on, which are war and peace, which is a really good book. I read it in college. They made us journalism majors take 1 literature class. And I looked at the list of literature classes. There was only one that made you read only 1 book. I didn't know how long the book would be. But I'm glad I took it. I learned a lot from the book, and I recommend it if you've got a few months free. And in Israel, you know, we constantly want to tell the world, oh, we're so much more than war and peace. We're so much more than what they portray us on CNN. But when it comes to election day, traditionally, Israelis have voted on those 2 issues, on peace and security. This election was different. This election, people voted on other things. People voted on the economy for a change, like a normal country, which was nice to see. A year and a half ago, we had in Israel 300,000 people protesting on the streets, demanding social justice, around the same time as there were protests on the streets in other countries in the Middle East. Israel handled their protesters a little bit different than other countries did. We didn't shoot at them. The government appointed a team of the top economic experts to solve their problems. And then the protesters then appointed a team of their own economic experts to respond to the economic experts appointed by the government. But this election, in a way, was the culmination of the Israeli Spring, where people voted on the economic issue. You know, in America, politicians vote on this slogan, it's the economy. Stupid, right? But in Israel, in the past, politicians had to be stupid to bring up the economy, because people were voting on the Palestinian issue to the point that they were voting the opposite of what made sense for them economically. Poor people were voting for the Likud party, which is a capitalist party that wants to cut benefits from the poor and help the rich. Rich people were voting for the Labor Party, which is a socialist party, wants to cut benefits from the rich and help the poor. It made no sense because people were voting on the Palestinian issue. In this election, there were people who went to the polls, held their nose, and voted for the party that they disagree with on the Palestinian issue because they were voting with their wallets. Second trend that I think the world missed inside Israeli society that affected how people voted was matters of religion and state. We have in Israel a small minority, 9% of Israelis consider themselves ultra-Orthodox. 10% consider themselves modern Orthodox. The difference between the two of them is that modern Orthodox work for a living and serve their compulsory service in the army, whereas the ultra-Orthodox believe that they need to be learning Torah full-time and not working and not going to the army. And Israelis became increasingly resentful of this, of one minority imposing its way of life on the majority and not taking part of the burden inside their society. And that affected how people voted as well. A third issue that affected how people voted was an issue of political corruption. People were sick and tired of the politicians. That happens here too, right? People were increasingly frustrated, and that affected how people voted. There was a survey taken by the Israel Democracy Institute, very comprehensive survey about how Israelis think, where they asked more than 100 questions. It was called the Democracy Index. I recommend people Google it, because it helps you understand who Israelis are and how they think. And one of the questions that they asked was, what professions do you respect the most? What professions do you respect the least? Now, you would think the politicians would be the profession that Israelis respect the least, but it's actually second least. What profession do Israelis respect even less? Anyone want to guess? Not lawyers. You're right, journalists. As someone who covers politics for the Jerusalem Post, I spend most of my time with politicians and journalists, with the scum of the earth, I guess. And so that affected how people voted as well. The party that did the best in the Israeli election is a party that had on it no politicians, the anti-politician party, which was called Yesh Atid. There is a future, led ironically by a former anchorman, by a journalist. And that is expected to be Netanyahu's main coalition partner in the government that he has to build legally by next Saturday. And so this election was about those things. It wasn't about war and peace. In fact, I got interviewed the day before the election by the BBC. And they asked me, what is this election about? And I told them the same thing I told you. And then they said, what is this election not about? I said, well, it's not about what you care about in Britain. It's not about settlements. It's not about the Palestinians. It's not about the peace process. And so they showed me saying that clip. And then the journalist ended the report by saying, and that doesn't bode well for peace in the Middle East. And I watched this report with dismay, because if they would have put in the rest of what I said, the other 10 minutes, I was explaining exactly why that was good for peace in the Middle East. Because people weren't voting on the Palestinian issue, we ended up with a parliament that's a lot more moderate. And the government also The government that Netanyahu is in the process of building is going to be a lot more ready to make peace with the Palestinians if the Palestinians will come and negotiate. They haven't been coming for 4 years. Now, the first deal Netanyahu made with another party to bring them into his government was with a party led by Tzipi Livni, our former foreign minister, who negotiated with the Palestinians before for more than a year, and they know that she's willing to be very generous to them in any kind of final status agreement that gives them no more excuses to not come to the table anymore. And so I think the next few years in Israel are going to be very exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of news that happens over the next 4 years. Not immediately, but over the next 4 years. Barack Obama is going to be coming to Israel next week, a week and a half, March 20th, 4 days after the deadline for Netanyahu to form a government. And I briefed British media in London, but right before coming here, and they said, what should we expect when Obama comes to Israel? And I said, expect to have to fill up page 13 with this visit, because there's not going to be any headlines. It's not going to be page 1, unless something goes very, very wrong. Obama is coming in order to try to rebuild his ties with both the Israelis and the Palestinians, who both lost faith in him for different reasons over the last 4 years. Israelis on the right, the Israelis who don't want there to be a peace process, wouldn't have liked him anyway. Israelis on the left, though, who want there desperately to be a peace process that would lead to 2 states for 2 peoples for Israel's own good, they were disappointed that under Obama that there wasn't a peace process, and they in part blamed him for it. And the Palestinians who wanted to have a Palestinian state given to them on a silver platter by the international community also grew frustrated with the President of the United States. And so this trip is not intended to generate any headlines. It's purposely intended to not generate headlines. It's intended to rebuild trust with both the Israelis and the Palestinians. And in that way, if you gain that trust, that's the foundation for things that can happen later on, for headlines that will eventually happen. Now, for Israelis, the best way to earn their trust is to make them feel confident that the president will do everything possible to prevent the nuclearization of Iran, which is the issue that Israelis are most worried about. Let's go back to the first meeting between Netanyahu and Obama last term, back in May 2009, in the White House. High-profile disagreement between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel, which was a harbinger of many more to come. Netanyahu says, Mr. President, if you succeed at preventing the nuclearization of Iran, the extremists in the region are defeated and the moderates empowered, and you can make peace in the Middle East. Obama says, no. I see it the other way. When I make peace between Israel and the Palestinians, that will bring the Arab and Muslim world on board to prevent the nuclearization of Iran. Very high-profile disagreement. Israelis heard Obama, and they got very worried. They said, we've been trying to make peace with the Palestinians for a very long time. We can't wait to prevent the crazy man in Iran from getting the bomb. Arab leaders heard this, and they were even more worried. They said Obama wasn't listening to us. We weren't telling him to help the Palestinians. I wish they were. We were telling him, cut off the head of the snake. Deal with Iran right now. That's what WikiLeaks ended up revealing that the Arab and Muslim world was telling Obama. They wanted Iran to be dealt with first, just like Israel did. And you know what? In this particular fight, Netanyahu won. On other things, Obama won. Iran will be dealt with first. There's an effort right now that's very serious to prevent the nuclearization of Iran by non-military means. There are sanctions that are intensified, that are on the way to being effective. The Iranian regime is being hit very hard to the point that they're losing $130 million every single day. We lost $40 billion in 2012. If you were losing that kind of money in your job, I think you'd get fired by now. And so the sanctions on Iran are going to intensify between now and the deadline that Netanyahu set in his speech to the United Nations in September. Netanyahu said that the world has to work to prevent the nuclearization of Iran by what he said was spring, summer. And sure enough, when is Obama coming to Israel? First day of spring. Because that's the way he interpreted spring, summer. We interpret it a little bit differently in Israel, though, as the only month that's in both spring and summer, which is June. And in Iran, in June, they have an election coming up. And so the hope is that just like that last election that they had in Iran 4 years ago, which wasn't allowed to be democratic, the people took to the streets. And then the world leaders kind of let them down. That this time, when their election won't be any more democratic than the one before, and the people take to the streets again, perhaps the world leaders help them. The sanctions will have been intensified so far that the regime there will realize, with the people being so angry, that they either give up the nuclear program or they lose power. And so there is renewed hope that the nuclearization of Iran can be prevented by non-military means. Netanyahu gave a speech via satellite to AIPAC, to the pro-Israel lobby in Washington today, to 13,000 people who were there, and which he said sanctions alone won't prevent the nuclearization of Iran. There has to be a credible military threat to avoid military action, ironically. He said the only time Iran ever stopped their nuclear program was back in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, and Iran thought we must be next. And so that's what Netanyahu is pushing for. And today is the first day of work for the new American Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, and he's meeting with the Minister of Defense of Israel, Ehud Barak, to make sure that strategy is coordinated properly between the two countries. And there is hope that they can succeed in preventing the nuclearization of Iran without resorting to military action, which is the key to the success of what at the beginning optimistically was called the Arab Spring. Right now, looking back on it, it doesn't look too spring-like Bashar Assad in Syria murdering 50,000 of his own people with the world not doing anything to stop. From the Israeli standpoint, even though we don't exactly have peace with Syria, we cry to see the Syrians killing each other. The Passover Holiday is coming up. In the Passover Holiday, we drink 4 cups of wine, except for 10 drops. We take 10 drops out of the wine glass because of the 10 plagues that the Egyptians went through. It's surprising. You know, God punished the Egyptians with those plagues. Why would we question God? Why would we be sad about something God did to our enemies? Shouldn't we be happy about that? And the answer is absolutely not. We're instructed to take the wine out of our glasses because it pains us to see our enemies go through misery. And that's what we feel about what's going on right now in Syria. You know, none of the people there dying are Jews, and none of them are Zionists. They all hate us. Every last one of them. You learn in your international media classes about the enemy of your enemy is your friend, and better the devil than you know, and the devil that you don't know. In Syria, it's not really true from Israel's perspective. And the enemy of your enemy is your enemy, and the devil you know and the devil you don't know, they're both devils. And yet, it's absolutely terrible, and we wish the world would have intervened a long time ago to stop the slaughter of innocents. But from the Israeli standpoint, seeing that the Syrian army, a strong army built by Russia, is self-destructed, not such a bad thing. That it's not as strong as it used to be threatening us. And they're going to be busy for a while up there in Syria, too busy to deal with us in Israel. In Egypt, the people there have also gone through some strife, and we wish better for them. They're starting to see that radical Islam is not the way. And from the Israeli standpoint, that's a good thing. We want more of the countries in the region to go in the direction of the West. And when the Arab Spring started, I remember watching what was going on from my office in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, the heart of Israeli democracy, and thinking, isn't this great? The countries around us are going to have what we have. The democracy, technology, the economy that we have sooner rather than later. We in Israel are sick and tired of being the only stable democracy in the Middle East. We want other countries to enjoy what we're enjoying, the high-tech economy that we have. And we hope that would happen, and it's taking longer than we thought. Too many countries in the region have gone in a direction that gives their people less power, not more power. but it's going to happen eventually. It's going to happen that people are going to go in the right direction and realize that democracy and freedom is the way to go. And we hope that everybody in our region will have a better situation little by little. Because we care. You know, in Israel, we're enjoying a high-tech boom. All the top high-tech companies in the world have their top research and development facilities in Israel. We invented so many of the things that you guys use every day back here in Idaho, whether it's wireless internet or instant messaging or the Pentium and some Trino chips inside your laptop and your jump drive, your flash drive. You know, so many of the things that you use every day over here. Israelis know that their goal is to be what the prophet Isaiah said we would be, which is the light unto the nations. But it's not easy in the neighborhood in which we live. But we're trying to do our best against all odds. We're trying to be a leader in trying to make the world a better place. We recycle more of our water than any country in the world. 78% of our water. The country that's second in the world is Spain with 12%. There's a lot to be really proud of. Going to hospitals in Israel, you see Arabs and Jews, the ultimate coexistence, Arab and Jewish doctors treating Arab and Jewish patients, trying to help out each other. Whenever there's a natural disaster around the world, Israel sends teams that are there before any other teams, saving lives. We're a country that's very diverse with people from all over the world. We just had last week our beauty pageant for Miss Israel, and the woman who won is an Ethiopian immigrant who looks just like Beyonce. Doesn't look like your typical Jewish girl from New Jersey. And so we're not waiting in Israel for us to know what's going to happen in the region or whether there'll be an existential threat from Iran or where our final border is going to be. We're living our life right now, and this election proved it. That we had an election that was on who we are as a people, as a Jewish and democratic state together, and how to make those things work beautifully together while empowering our non-Jewish minorities. We had an election that shows we're becoming a little bit more of a normal country. At the age of almost 65, we were founded in 48, we're finally growing up. And that's a really good sign. I've never been more proud to be Israeli, and I've never been more proud to be American. The two countries in the world that have a president who has won the Nobel Peace Prize. And I hope that things in Israel continue to get better, that things in the region with the Palestinians and the other people in the region continue to get better, and also here in America. Thank you very much. I purposely left a lot of time for questions. Feel free to ask anything about anything I talked about or anything that I did. Anything you've ever wanted to know. All the way in the back. Yes, Professor. When I call people, say your name.
I'm Gary Hunter. Welcome to Idaho.
Thank you.
Sorry I came in late, but I was teaching a class.
That's a good excuse.
Does one election a trend make? I mean, I'd like to believe what you said is all true. That we know the next election won't just be about world peace.
We have no idea. You're absolutely right. We know what neighborhood we live in. We know we can't rest on our laurels. We know that God said we'll always be a nation that dwells alone. That as important as it is that we have allies around the world, in the end that we have to fend for ourselves. And that there are countries all around us that have not made peace with us. We've made peace with Egypt and Jordan, and Turkey and Mauritania. Those are 4 Muslim countries, but there are 53 others in the world that have not made peace with us. And we would love to have peace with them. And so it could very well be that the next election will go back to being the way it was before. But, you know, I personally think that over the next 4 years there's going to be a lot happening on the peace process front. And so maybe there won't be a need for the next election to be about that. Yes?
I'm Terry from Denmark. I think you mentioned, you touched upon a quite important issue. You mentioned order. How do you think that is going to be a problem in the peacemaking process in the future? Is it become more scarce in the region? and some of the settlements are being said to like be done just to get territories where there is water holdings. Like, how do you think that is going to be a problem in the peacemaking process?
So, when it comes to making peace and when it comes to dividing a land into two states for two peoples, you have to deal with a lot of complicated issues. They're not all ideological issues. Some of the issues are very technical, like water, as Per brings up. That's why you have experts on such things. There are biomedical engineers who know exactly how to divide up water systems to ensure that both sides will have what they need, will have equality. In Israel, the main expert on the subject is Professor Alon Tal, Alontal, from the Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and he's written extensively about the topic and has negotiated with the Palestinians about how to bring it about. He ran for Knesset in this election in the party of Tzipi Livni, who will be heading our negotiations. So chances are he will be the one who continues the negotiations, which there already were that bore fruit on the water issue in the past, with the Palestinians. And he is someone who is very, very moderate and will make sure that that won't be a problem. There are other issues that are tougher. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name's Ben. I'm wondering, can you paint us a picture or envision a situation where Israel gives up its nuclear weapons?
Wow. Messiah coming would be helpful. Let's take a step back. Officially, Israel has a policy of nuclear ambiguity, which means that Israel may or may not have nuclear weapons in the nuclear power plant in the city of Dimona on Herzl Street, where my Uncle Shmulik works. It may or may not exist.
You're not bound to that.
He may or may not exist. But if Israel did have nuclear weapons, Israel's never threatened any country with nuclear weapons. And if Israel's had it, then it's had it since the 1960s. So it's been 50 years. And if so, then what it has done is create a deterrent, which is the goal of having nuclear weapons, to prevent war. As opposed to Iran, which brags about wanting to wipe Israel off the map, that wants to get nuclear weapons, according to the latest report of the IAEA, which said that it's very clear that they want to have their nuclear capability for a military purpose. They want to use it for offense. Do I see a situation where Israel would not need a nuclear deterrent for defense? The world would have to be very, very different than it is now. You would have to have no country committed to wiping Israel off the map. Now there are more than 50 of those. And that's a problem. And so unfortunately, that's not going to happen anytime soon, just like America will have nuclear weapons for the foreseeable future, though Barack Obama has done a lot to try to bring that down. Yeah.
If Iran...
What's your name?
Oh, Professor Daly from Department of Political Economy.
Mm-hmm.
If Iran is serious about the rhetoric that we've heard about wiping Israel off the map, through the use of nuclear weapons, wouldn't that also wipe off thousands and thousands of Palestinians, and wouldn't it bring about universal condemnation and really do nothing good for Iran itself? Because if it's really a deterrent, maybe Iran wants it also as a deterrent.
Okay, so the question is about Iran and its nuclear weapons program. It's very much true that if they would attack Israel, then they would attack a lot of Arabs. Israel's a country that is 75% of them Jewish, 20% Arab Muslim, and 5% Christians and other, and that's not counting the Palestinians. And so Bernard Lewis has the explanation, the professor from Princeton, that unlike the Cold War with the Soviet Union, where nuclear weapons mutually assured destruction was the deterrent, with Iran, that it's actually an incentive, that they want to kill both Muslims and Jews while wiping Israel off the map. That is one theory. Iran says that they want to have it for nuclear energy, but they have plenty of oil. and they already have produced more than enough than they would need for nuclear energy for a very long time, according to the main think tank monitoring very closely the progress of the Iranian nuclear program, which is called ISIS, which is in Washington. It seems like even though they behave rationally in some ways, they behave irrationally in others. I haven't called on a woman yet. I come from a very egalitarian country. We're the second country in the world that has a female head of state. Okay, well, his hair is a little longer. And then we'll get back to it.
My name is I had a question about Meir Dagan, and when he stepped down from the Mossad in 2011, he kind of came forward to the press. Did you ever get a chance to cover that at all, and what was your experience with that?
So Meir Dagan is a former head of the Israeli Mossad. He was on the job for 8 years, which is pretty rare. It's normally a 4-year appointment, but he kept on getting extended because he apparently was doing good work in sabotaging the Iranian nuclear program, where for years there were scientists who went poof in the night, and all kinds of viruses that people didn't know where they came from. And now, after retiring from that post, he heads an organization that promotes electoral reform in Israel, and so I've gotten to go to his press conferences in that capacity. But when you ask him questions about Iran's nuclear program, he's a little bit less talkative. But his perspective is that there shouldn't be a military approach, that everything should be possible, should be tried to avoid a military approach, which is actually the same approach of the Israeli government, except the Israeli government sounds like it wants to attack tomorrow sometimes, because they believe that the bluster helps get the world to take the Iranian nuclear program more seriously, and helps the efforts to intensify sanctions and other non-military means that can be effective in avoiding the military approach. So in the end, their goal is the same, but their approach is very different, with Dagan's being quiet and people like Netanyahu and the Israeli government being way too loud. Yeah?
So about, well, there's been a lot of talk.
Your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Tirsa. There's been a lot of recent talk in the news about the kind of this measure's response of Israel towards the attacks from the Palestinians. Like, it's 100 dead in the Palestinian side and 3 people dead in the Israeli side. Considering that Israel has the Iron Dome and like much more technological advances. Talking that Israel wants peace, like it's, well, I understand that the Palestinians started the attacks, but the response was like somewhat disproportionate.
Okay, so, war ain't the way it used to be. In the past, you had a war, and whoever killed more people won. And whoever killed more people was usually a bad guy. And those things aren't true anymore. Things are asymmetrical now. And the way people used to see things doesn't really work anymore. And so what you need to be looking at who they're aiming at. And so when you see rocket fire from Gaza that's intended to murder civilians, men, women, and children, they're not firing at military bases. If they were, that would be totally understandable. That wouldn't even be terror. That would be a legitimate form of war. But when you're aiming at civilian populations, that's what makes it terrorism. Every single rocket has the potential to kill a whole family. The very fact that they haven't doesn't make it right. And the very fact that Israel, in responding, aiming at the terrorists, ended up killing civilians, that more people than the Palestinians killed on the Israeli side, doesn't make it wrong or right either. What matters is that they were aiming at the terrorists and doing everything possible to avoid civilian deaths. So you've got one side that's trying to kill as many civilians as possible. You've got the other side that's trying to kill as few civilians as possible. And one side was more effective than the other. But those are all important things to keep in mind when you're looking at what's going on. Look again for a woman. And okay, so that gentleman's been looking for a while, and then over here, yeah.
Okay, so as a journalist,
Please.
As a journalist covering these very contentious issues that spread into both social, cultural, huge issues right now in the world, what are your perspectives on objectivity in journalism and, or political activism. What is the role of the journalist? And these sorts of things where they themselves are personally engaged as a member of,
Of their community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a tough call. Every journalist draws his red lines for himself. Because you're a journalist, but you're a human being. And you're a member of your community. You're a citizen of your country. You're a proud patriot of your country. And so what I do, my beat at the Jerusalem Post is I cover internal Israeli politics. My job is to follow around the politicians and write about what they tell me about each other. It's kind of like being back in high school where I go to one politician and hear gossip about another politician, and then I go back to that politician. Do you hear what she said about you? So when it comes to internal Israeli politics, I don't think of what my opinion would be. Because I need to be the messenger. I need to be objective. But then when it's Israel against its enemies, then I can take the side of my country. Just like if I was living in America and America went to war with whoever it went to war, I can raise an American flag with pride. I'm proud to be American, I'm proud to be Israeli. And that's the way I draw the line. Other people draw the line in different kinds of places, and I respect that. We have a woman raising a hand, and then okay.
Hi, you talked about how journalism is
What's your
thriving
name?
in Israel. Oh, I'm Annie.
Yeah.
If journalism is thriving in Israel, why do you think it's regarded as the least trustworthy profession right now?
It's fascinating, Annie, that Israelis, they want desperately to know what's going on, but they look at the media with a grain of salt. Just like people do here. Here the media, different media outlets are seen as biased in one direction or another, right? And the same thing is true in Israel. We have newspapers that are very anti-Netanyahu, blatantly. And we have one newspaper, which was actually founded by a rich American Jew named Sheldon Adelson, who's a big funder of the Republican Party as well, that is seen as very pro-Netanyahu. And so everyone has their bias in the different newspapers, and so that makes Israelis skeptical of them, and yet reading them voraciously. It's interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, over here.
My name is Christian Tabitz. I'm from Lebanon, and I just have I have a question, but also I just want to go back to the point where you're speaking about just about the same claims that attacking the military and not attacking civilians, where we know that in Lebanon, at least for example, in the 2006 war, the 1982, there was it wasn't only targeting militant groups, because we can see all West Beirut was wiped out, and that wasn't just specifying on military, where it was complete wipeout. And I have some friends in Israel as well who tell me the same, how they feel a bit immoral about just at least the recent Gaza conflict, and about how, I don't know if it's, my friends were at least saying that it was a plan to wipe out and not just, we have, an example would be Kana, for example, in Lebanon, if you've heard about that, the UN base.
That was a mistake.
In Israel, higher technologies that can detect when they went for the attack in Gaza and killed the Prime Minister of Hamas, what's his name? Ja'bari.
So, he was the chief of staff of the army.
And in Ma'arif newspaper, they said Israel kills its security, and they detect his car, So Israel has higher technology than we expect, and it's really to have, it's always, whenever any Israeli prime minister comes to talk on TV, and any civilians are killed, they will say it's by mistake, but I don't see it as a mistake actually.
Okay, both of you raised very good points, and in warfare, mistakes are made by every army, including the American army. When mistakes are made, then people apologize. And what was brought up of Kafr Kana, which is a Lebanese town that was hit by mistake, that did in fact happen by mistake. Whereas sometimes you have successes where you have, as Mohammed points out, targeted killings that is a policy that's been adopted by armies around the world as being moral, because you're hitting the terrorist himself. where America learned a lot from Israel about how to do that.
But Al-Ja'bar himself was the man who kept the security of Israel for a long time. I mean, he was one of the people who did not let the Hamas people, made the
fire rockets sometimes.
Fire rockets, right? So
And the other times he told them to fire rockets.
No, he did not. Like he was the he taught them, of course, but he was the one who made he made the peacetime where no rockets were dropped in Israel at that time, right? But but after they killed him and assassinated him, it's like you come and kill my father. What do you expect from me to do? Like and you're putting people in a strip where miserable life is taking place, and people there are emotionally safe if you go and see. They're not allowed to travel. They're not allowed to go anywhere. They're just having this strip and go see their miserable life. So what do you expect from these people? Of course, the blockade of Gaza creates the violence, and that's what I see it. Even though I am from Palestine and I have never seen Gaza, and maybe I only met one guy from Gaza, and that's it. Like, and like one point I would like to ask you or something.
Please.
Yeah.
Well, I want to respond. Can I respond to the things you said already now, because there's so much?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, what started the recent operation in Gaza a couple months ago was Israel killing the chief of staff of Hamas, which is a terrorist organization committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. And he authorized and perpetrated hundreds and hundreds of terrorist attacks against Israeli men, women, and children. And at a certain point, Israel said enough is enough. And by killing him, it led to a period of calm with the people in Gaza, and hopefully there won't need to be any more operations in the future. That's what we all hope and pray for. I was in Gaza.
But killing him does not solve the problem. Like Israel.
Sometimes it does.
Okay,
when you kill really bad people.
Okay, maybe. Well, it depends what's your definition to bad people. Then, but let's say that you said that they killed They killed Al-Ja'bar because he's bad, he committed a crime. But do you think that people in Gaza, that people who are closed-minded because they're not exposed to other cultures of the world, so what do you expect from these people? Do you expect from them just to be silent and do anything? No, I don't think so. Their reaction would be aggressive because they are people who are not allowed to go anywhere. They're just in their houses in a region where there are a lot of radical Muslims there who believe that, believe different things, and they are spreading the violence around the people, and people, of course, will listen from them because these are the only people. And if you keep killing people there, do you think that people in Gaza will be sad if you kill them? They will think he's a martyr, he will go to heaven, and that's it. That's how people are, and they will be happy, But that will create also violence there. I don't think killing people there in Gaza will really help, because since Israel attacked Gaza, there was no goals achieved for Israel. Like, I haven't seen any goal. Like, for example, when Hamas made Gilad Shalit as a prisoner, what did Israel achieve? Did Israel achieve that Gilad Shalit was released? No, nothing was, except that thousand civilians were killed, among them children and women.
Okay. I remember being in Gaza when the Israeli government decided to evacuate every single Jew from Gaza in order to end Israel being there. Now, this was disputed territory. Israel had a right to be there, but decided to go above and beyond the call. And everybody who was Jewish was forced to leave. People had been living there for 3 generations. It was very, very painful to evacuate 10,000 people. But Israel did it in the hopes of achieving peace. We hoped that Gaza would become a haven that would show the world what a Palestinian state could be, that would lead to Israel withdrawing from the overwhelming majority of the West Bank and a peace agreement that would be signed. And it didn't turn out that way. Unfortunately, Abbas, the Palestinian president, was overthrown in Gaza by his people, by Hamas. I don't like the word coup so much, I like the word overthrow, because it describes better what happened. The Hamas literally threw his people off the top of buildings. That's how they took over. They literally overthrew. And since then, they've been under radical Muslim rule there in Gaza. And the Gaza Strip has been, unfortunately, a base for terror. And the people of Gaza deserve better. Now, what Israel and Egypt did was made sure that weapons couldn't go into Gaza. And so there was a blockade on Gaza for a while that's been gradually eased. And so we hope and pray in Israel that things in Gaza and things in the entire region are going to get better and better. There's a young woman here who's been waiting for a while to ask.
My name is Alessandra, and I was wondering, like as a journalist, to what extent do you think that the news here in the U.S. portray Israel as the good guy and like Palestinians as not? I mean, I say this because I was very surprised. I go to University of Florida.
Oh yeah.
And when the whole attacks happened like months ago, there was a lot of rallies organized by the Jewish community in the school, and then many people who really didn't have any connection with the whole Jewish community itself. They were part of it, and they just like said how everything was a terrorist attack without. I mean, I just feel like a lot of people said, "Oh, I read that in the news." So I'm wondering, to what extent do you think?
It's very interesting because if you talk to people in Israel, they would think the entire international media is against Israel. That the world sees Israel as an aggressor, that the world sees Israel only through the prism of war and peace, and doesn't see Israelis for who they really are, and that they can't get a break when it comes to the media, not in America and not anywhere else. That's the perception among Israelis. And yet, in the public opinion polls in America, unlike in Europe, Israelis are doing all right. The overwhelming majority of Americans identify with Israel. They see it as a Jewish state. It's kind of like the Jew gets beaten up in your average public school. It's just like a wimpy country that's surrounded by enemies that against this same Islamic fundamentalism that attacked America on September 11th, that we're in the front lines fighting against. That's the message that's gotten out. It's helped a little bit, but there's a long way to go in terms of making Israelis and making people around the world understand what Israel's going through. Go for it.
Can I ask another
Please.
question? Yeah, thank you. So, I think that peace is not the solution in the Middle East. I know everybody's looking at me like that, but I don't think that peace is the solution in the Middle East, and I don't believe in war at the same time. But using the peace, it's a fashionable word that all the leaders, both in the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, Benjamin Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas, both of them are using this word just as a hypocrite way, of showing the world, oh, we want peace. Neither Mahmoud Abbas nor Netanyahu need peace. I think people who live in Israel and people who live in Palestine, normal people just like me, who are seeking for peace. But these leaders, like these people, I don't think they ever ask for peace, because Mahmoud Abbas goes to talk, and when he went to ask for the Palestinian state without even putting the borders or anything, he asked for peace and stuff. And same when Netanyahu comes and says we want peace. I don't think that peace is the solution, first of all. Second of all, like the main point of creating the two solutions and the area that's going to be so much fight on it, which is East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. But by making Jerusalem as part of Israel, I think now, as a Muslim or as a Palestinian, I am not allowed to go to Jerusalem. Why? First of all. Second of all, Christians and Christian Palestinians and Muslims are not allowed to go to Jerusalem, to East Jerusalem. And I'm just curious to know why Israel is doing this.
Okay, so first of all, on the Jerusalem issue. When Jerusalem was occupied between 1948 and 1967 by Jordan, no Jew was allowed into any of the holy sites of Judaism.
And that's wrong.
And now, since 1967, Jews, Christians, and Muslims have access, except Jews are prevented from going up on the Temple Mount, which is the holiest site in Judaism, by the Israeli government. And so there are different rules about when different people go, and for security reasons and everything, but Jews, Christians, and Muslims have free access to holy sites throughout the country since it's been under Israeli control. Now, let me go on. The key to the future is education. Every peace agreement that Israel signed over the last 20 years has said that both sides have to teach their children tolerance. And that's what really has to happen. On the Arab side, unfortunately, they're still naming squares after suicide bombers and having kid shows that tell children that that's what they should be when they grow up. Whereas my kids come back from school with peace signs and doves. I define the word peace as Israelis and Palestinians eating hummus together in public squares. You know, that's not going to happen tomorrow or the next day.
That's happening now, actually. That's happening now between my father. That's happening now between my father and the guy who my dad, because my dad works in Israel, and I went with my dad because when I got my visa, I had to go to Jerusalem to take my visa. I took a permission, so I went to visit my dad in Netanya, and they were eating hummus together, and I saw them.
And I'm talking about
the normal people, not about the leaders.
Who talking about a final border is something that will create normalcy, where you have a border that's set and clear. And then after you have a generation of people taught education, taught tolerance and peace, then you can have fences go down and everyone getting along. And that's the hope for the future for real peace. There's a professor in the back raising his hand.
My name is John. I'm an academic team. And you just brought up a word that I've been wanting to ask about, and that's education. I think it's safe to say that the discourse about education in this country right now is a little bit confused. And I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about how you see the sort of the political and social discussion about education in Israel, and is there support for higher education? Are people willing to pay for education in a real way that will not only move Israel economically, but also contribute to discussions about peace?
Absolutely. More Israelis get a college degree than any other people per capita in the world. There used to be just 5 universities, and the universities prevented colleges from opening up, and that changed about 15 years ago, and now there's colleges in every little city. And it's assumed that everyone goes to college. They pay only 10,000 shekels a year, which is about $3,000, and yet they complain. And people who move to the country actually get a degree for free because it's so important for Israel. And so we realize that education is the key to the future. And just like in America, in Israel, your institutions of higher learning are liberal bastions where people become more moderate in their views, which also has an effect on things for the future. Somebody else there in the back who was raising his hand, yeah.
I haven't heard recently as much about this issue, but in the last couple of years I heard a lot about the West Bank, and the issue that was being brought up was, from the perspective I heard, was that Israel was creating settlement colonies to take over the West Bank area, to bit by bit populate it with Jewish civilians until they could eventually annex it. And I haven't heard a whole lot about that issue, and I was wondering if I could hear your perspective on that, or just more information that I, as your typical schmuck American, wouldn't know much about.
No problem. From 1948 to 1967, the West Bank was under Jordanian control, which was not recognized by any country in the world. That was the result of the 1948 Israeli War of Independence, in which Israel did not win the land that was the heartland of the Jewish people in the Bible. Before that, it was under British control, and the British mandate was recognized by the world. And so since then, since the British left on May 14th, 1948, the land has been considered disputed territory, which means it goes back and forth, and until there's a resolution, until there's a peace agreement, then the world won't recognize who the land belongs to. It's land that's in dispute. Now, land that's in dispute, both sides have a right to build there. And so Jews build there, and Arabs build there. But Israel restricts the Jews. There are Jews who want to live in the biblical heartland of the Jewish people, but Israel says all the time, no, you can't build there because we want there to be a final status agreement with the Palestinians. And so there's all kinds of limitations. And in the end, there will be negotiations. The last day that there were real negotiations was on August 30th, 2008, when Ehud Olmert was Prime Minister of Israel. And he offered the Palestinians 100% of the West Bank territory with some land swaps to deal with the fact that there are areas that are closest to where the border was between 48 and 67, where there are now Jewish towns that have as many as 30,000 people. And so you could draw the border in a little bit of a different kind of way to give them the same amount of territory, but these places Israel would keep. There was nothing holy about the way the line was drawn between 48 and 67. It was an armistice line in 1949, and there was a lull in the fighting, and a Jordanian general and an Israeli general got together. One said, my troops are over here. The other one said, my troops are over here. And they drew a thick green line in the middle, indiscriminately, thinking it would last a few days. There's nothing holy about that line. The line will be drawn in negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. And between now and then, a lot's going to happen. But we hope that there will be a solution, because Israel is sick and tired of war. Israelis want there to be peace with all of its neighbors. And the Israeli government, including the one just elected, will go a long way to bring that about. It was Barack Obama who said that there's an irony in Israel. That in Israel, historically, it's taken the left to make war and the right to make peace. That's an irony. You know, you normally associate the right with war and the left with peace. In the past in Israel, though, when the right went to war, the left protested against it. But when the left went to war, the people of Israel united. And when the when the left tried to make peace, then you had a prime minister of Israel was assassinated. The right got so upset. And when the right made peace, the peace agreements lasted. So Netanyahu comes from the right, and he's the kind of person who could set a final border between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank, wherever they would agree to build it. And then everyone will know who can build on one side and who can build on the other side, and that's it. Someone there in the front, yeah. Oh, a woman over here. Go ahead.
So, Israel's politics, at least in this election, have taken a turn for the better. So, what's the next thing that you think in Israel needs to start taking a turn for the better internally?
Wow. What's your name?
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle asks what Israel needs to take a turn for the better internally, and the answer is sports teams. Terrible. In the last Olympics, we didn't win a single medal. It was so embarrassing. Our only player in the NBA is Omri Caspi, who's like the back of the bench of the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the worst teams in the NBA. So I think on that, we have a really long way to go. But we did finish second in the international championship of chess. Juice. Yes, sir.
So, if we are to sort of take a word for good that Israel is sincerely working towards peace, like in the soon future, do you think it's the right signal to send? Keep on building new settlements? Do you think it's the right signal to send in the peacemaking process? That they're willing to negotiate peace, but also still taking away territory that is now claimed by Palestinians?
What happened was, you had the President of the United States ask Israel to have a 10-month settlement freeze in hopes that it would bring the Palestinians to the negotiating table. It didn't work. And that was a terrible, terrible thing that Israel did to its people. You're talking about communities where people live inside the community. And you told them that they can't build on land that they own. That they can't even expand their own house. Their kid gets married, and you have land next door where you're in the middle of a city, and you can't build it even if you own the land. So, you know, sometimes there's been policies from the United States that made sense, where they said that Israel can build in the West Bank, but only in settlement blocks that everyone believes will be part of Israel forever. You can't expand the blocks. That way you don't affect the final borders of the state of Israel and of a Palestinian state. That was the policy of Clinton and Bush, Democratic and Republican administrations. When Obama said that Israel couldn't build anywhere over the pre-67 border, what it did was it undermined support for him among the Israeli left, among the people that want there to be a peace agreement, because they said, if you're not even allowing us to build in consensus areas that everyone believes will be part of Israel forever, then that's something that no Israeli government would ever agree to. And then that's something that the Palestinians didn't have a problem with in the past, when there were plenty of negotiations going on while Israel was building, and now they won't be able to ask for anything less. And so those kinds of demands ended up resulting in there not being a peace process for 4 years. So everyone needs to take a realistic look at what's going on, bring people to the negotiating table without preconditions, And that's the key to success. All the way in the back, yes, please, what's your name?
My name is Malak. I'm from Judaic City,
Wonderful.
Palestine. You said a while ago that like one way to achieve peace is through education in both sides. How is that possible if Israel actually controls what is in our history books at the Palestinian side? If we cannot educate our kids about Nakba, we cannot educate them about 1967 and the other intifada as well. How is that possible if Israel controls what we write in our history books?
My gosh, since 1993, Israel has had no control over the education ministry of the Palestinian Authority.
Yes, it did.
In 1993, in the Oslo Peace Agreement, Israel withdrew from Area A and Area B in the West Bank, including Jericho, where you have 95 to 97% of the Palestinians living. The Palestinian Authority has its own education minister, its own education authority, and Israel does not intervene in it. Among Israeli Arabs, they also have their own school system, where they do learn about the Nakba, and so do Jews. The Jews themselves learn the Palestinian narrative in their public schools.
And I remember in 6th grade, we no longer have our nationalism book. It's after, I think that was 2002 or 2000 and I don't know, 2002, 2004, something like 3 and 4, yeah. It just suddenly we not have that curriculum of us talking there is the word Nakba is no longer over there these dates 1967, 1948 is no longer, and then kids right now they don't know, all they hear about the history is from their parents. And
in your schools in Jericho?
Yeah, also in my school. It's not only about learning about the history of the country itself and learning about nationality. This is the book we had to go to secret libraries to get it. But it was about learning chemistry. In my chemistry lab, a lot of things that we were not allowed to buy, the teacher were not allowed to buy. Also, in Najah University, the professor is always the Israeli people, the Israeli soldiers. Sometimes we go to his house. Also, my chemistry teacher was taken to a prison for investigations, and we did not learn chemistry for 2 months, and that also affects the education process in my country. And whenever I asked my professor why we're not allowed to learn, for example, about it was a unit in physics about medical physics or something like that. It was deleted by the book. I asked the professor why, and then he told me it's because of security reasons. That's the background.
Interesting. Malaka, yes.
As well, I came from international school in the States in New Mexico, and we were working last year on a project to build actually a library in my small town because of the situation. We didn't have a high school. We had our first high school 3 years ago. That's when we get the permission after 5 years of negotiation to build actually a high school, because at that time, because I live in a very small conservative town, that all the girls after 9th grade, they no longer go to school, or they do it, they get married and then sit at the house, that's it. Because they will have to go to another city.
He's telling me that I have to go soon because I'm going to be speaking in Northwest Nazarene University, but I just want to say that I've learned a lot from meeting you over here. It's beautiful that you have here students from all over who've had so many different experiences in life, and keep on learning as much as you can about what's going on in Israel. I recommend the website of my newspaper, the Jerusalem Post, www.jpost.com. I'm Gil_Hoffman on Twitter. And there's different ways of making things better. In my region, I say it's easy, EASY, which stands for education, advocacy, solidarity, and your prayers. So let's pray that everybody will have a brighter day. Thank you very much.